this is what we always used to do. We always used to work together in communities and grow food together and help each other. And I genuinely feel that a community benefit society is a business model that a lot more businesses need to adopt.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the You Can't Eat Money podcast. This episode is one that has been in the works for a few months, and I'm stoked to finally share it. Back in June, Patagonia launched its campaign to end bottom trawling in our oceans with a series of incredible films about people and businesses taking action to guard our seas. Patagonia held an event in London to premiere these films, and that's where I discovered Câr-y-Môr and one of its founders, Francois Beyers. At the end of the Q&A, Francois made a powerful speech about his passion for the oceans and the solution he is working on with Câr-y-Môr. At that moment, I just knew I had to get Francois on the podcast to tell his story as well as that of Câr-y-Môr. Câr-y-Môr is a community-owned and operated regenerative ocean farm on the coast of Wales that is rediscovering the Welsh connection with seaweed while using it to restore ocean ecosystems. The name Câr-y-Môr literally translates to "for the love of the sea," which is also the title of the film Patagonia created about the business. Câr-y-Môr is an incredible business powered by an incredible community. I'm very thankful to Francois for taking time to chat, and to the Patagonia team who created space for people to find out about the business and connect around a shared passion for the oceans, as well as shine a light on a company that is making delicious and nutritious seaweed and other ocean products from regenerative ocean farming. To support the Patagonia campaign to end bottom trawling, please visit patagonia.com/oceans, and to find out more about Câr-y-Môr, visit carymor.wales. That's carymor.wales. Without further delay, here's the latest episode of the You Can't Eat Money podcast with Francois Beyers, co-founder of Câr-y-Môr. Today on the You Can't Eat Money podcast, we have Francois Beyers, one of the co-founders of Câr-y-Môr in Wales. Thanks so much for joining us today, Francois.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to do this podcast with you.
Amazing. So let's start with the basics. What is Câr-y-Môr? How did it get started? What is your role in the organization?
Certainly. The name itself is sometimes difficult, so I'll start there. Câr-y-Môr is Welsh for the love of the sea. And I think that's kind of the preface and the real reason why we are here. Câr-y-Môr came about, I want to say probably about 5-6 years ago, where as a family, we had a rare occasion that we got to spend time together. When I say family, it is my other half and her parents and sister and brother, as I am originally from South Africa, Cape Town. So we got together, we got talking, and we were all kind of on the same page of wanting to get back to the sea or closer to the sea. I was fortunate enough to grow up by the sea and in the sea as a kid in Cape Town, and my other half and her family, spent their childhoods sort of in and around the ocean as well. This was all before we had COVID kicking in, but we all kind of had this sort of drive that we wanted to get back to the sea. We started looking into it. My father-in-law, who's the other co-founder as well, he's got a background of shellfish farming, so we already had that sort of ready to go. My sister-in-law at the time was working for a gentleman in Freshwater West, Jonathan Williams, who has got a lovely business that he makes sort of wonderful seaweed dishes from. And he was saying that there's nobody that actually farms seaweed in Wales, and maybe we should be looking into something like that. So that then really triggered sort of the research and looking into what we needed to do. And I spoke to a Welsh-speaking friend of mine, and I said, look, this thing, for the love of the sea, we all love the sea. Like, how can we, what is there a Welsh name that we can use? And Câr-y-Môr was born from that.
from what I understand, Câr-y-Môr practices 3D ocean farming, which I've heard a few different words for it, from organizations like Green Wave and that have really been promoting this. So what is the sort of practice, the actual mechanisms of growing seaweed and some of the other elements of the 3D ocean farm that Câr-y-Môr is producing?
Absolutely. It is, again, it's a ocean farm, 3D ocean farm, IMTA, if you really want to get sort of, I guess, scientific behind it. Not a lot of people, if you're not into aquaculture or anything like that, it's a very vague concept, and it's still quite fun to try and explain it. So I think the simplest way for me I try and explain it is imagining an underwater garden. And there's this beautiful word that was coined by a lady called Janine Benyos, and it's called biomimicry. And the sort of, to break that word down, it just means that we look to nature to solve human problems. And I think that, to me, is a beautiful way of describing what an ocean farm does. Now, what is an ocean farm? Well, it's quite an innovative approach to aquaculture. It uses sort of a vertical farming system under the ocean sort of surface. So it tries and takes up as little space as possible. And then what happens is we grow seaweed and shellfish together. And that in its turn basically creates sort of new ecosystems and habitats and fish nurseries and so on. And it doesn't need any fresh water, no pesticides, no land. And so you'll also hear sort of zero input farming, because you don't need to do anything to it. It really just looks after itself. It just needs the sunshine and the nutrients in the water, and it looks after itself from there.
And we've had on an oyster farmer before from off the coast of California, and he talked about some of the tremendous benefits, sort of the ecosystem services that the oysters provide around things like cleaning the water. So when we look at this 3D ocean farm, what are sort of the benefits in terms of helping bring back life and vibrance to the ocean areas where these 3D ocean farms exist?
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's you do get to hear a lot about seaweed farms. There's quite a lot. There's a few in the UK. There's a lot more sort of in the US. Again, this is fairly a new concept in the Western world. This has been something that's been around for very, very many years, sort of in the East. But an ocean farm is a little bit new as well, where you do have sort of multiple species that do grow together. Now, there's endless sort of positives to it, but yes, apart from what the gentleman mentioned, from it's sort of filtering, the bivalves filtering the water, growing these multiple species together, one's waste is another's food. So anything that gets disregarded by the shellfish, the seaweed will basically take up, and vice versa. And seaweed is also very, very good at absorbing sort of extra nutrients that's going through the ocean column, the water column. So it can absorb phosphorus and nitrous, that nitrogen that finds its way from the runoffs from our agricultural land. So all the synthetic fertilizers and such that gets into our seas. So seaweed can absorb that as well. Bivalves also filter the water. So it's the combination of the two absolutely works brilliantly together.
And I want to sort of draw a line under 3D ocean farming versus what people have probably heard, especially here in the UK, around salmon farming, which has a pretty negative reputation. So when we look at comparing something like salmon farming and fish farming to 3D ocean farming, those are pretty different, and they have a pretty different impact on the ecosystems, right?
Yeah. I mean, salmon farming, I'm sure, if you're not aware already, is quite a very bad process of farming fish, especially, and we know that it pollutes the waters. It can spread disease. Again, it's back to these mass farming of animals and things. It's just happening in the sea, really. So unless it's really properly regulated and looked after, regenerative ocean farming is a very, very different thing altogether. Where ocean farming or regenerative ocean farming works in harmony with the marine ecosystems, and again, sort of back to that biomimicry discussed earlier. It's really it's something that's been around since the beginning of time. We are just trying to almost re-establish it in areas where it has now either been destroyed or, it really could do with regenerating sort of nurseries and marine ecosystems.
And since you're working in harmony with these marine ecosystems, how challenging is it to work in that sort of changing environment? I mean, I think often we've talked to farmers and such on the podcast, and that's challenging enough on land, but especially underneath the water, you can't really always see what's going on underneath there. So what unique challenges does that present for Câr-y-Môr in terms of working directly in that environment, which is sometimes obscured or obfuscated?
Yeah, absolutely. It does come with some challenges, especially where we are located. We're in the Ramsey Sound in St. David's, just off the coast of St. David's, and the stretch of water that comes through where our farms are is one of the highest tidal flows in Europe. And not just that, but we can get some pretty severe winter storms that blow through here as well. So all of that brings with itself a challenge for us to maintain the farms. We've only been in the water for about 3 years now. So the first sort of year, 2 years, I'd say, was a steep learning curve for us. Deploying a farm out there and, having got 70-mile-an-hour winds come through, serious currents, big waves. You have to account for everything in that when you've got these buoys floating on the water and headlines with the seaweed and shellfish attached to it. So you might not find that in a loch in Scotland as much, or in certain other areas of Europe or elsewhere. But we do have these challenges. But I think from the 3 years that we've been doing this, we've definitely learned a lot. We've had some incredible people that's working with us, local communities, fishermen that, born and bred here, that knows these waters like the back of their hands. And without them, I don't think we would have lasted our first winter. So, it's with the knowledge of that combined with sort of taking the lessons learned from failures and building on top of that. I think we've got a system and a farm set up now that's operating brilliantly, can handle most weather that gets thrown at it. Plus we do a lot of monitoring on it. So we work with a company called Pebble, Plant Ecology Beyond Land. They have deployed sort of multiple sort of monitoring systems on the farms that test sort of sediment, the flow of the water, the biodiversity. We'll have cameras on there to film such things as well. And then we do go out almost daily, weather permitting, to go and just either do maintenance on the farms or checking or harvesting. So there's always something happening, and we're always there to monitor it. But it's not always a very easy task. But such is ocean farming.
And one thing you mentioned there was about community and just how important community is to Câr-y-Môr. And so I know that Câr-y-Môr operates as a community benefit society. I'd love to understand what that means, but also if you can talk about some of your core values, which I know incorporate community as well.
Yeah, exactly. That the key when we kind of thought about the idea of Câr-y-Môr, there's two core values for us. We want to improve our coastal environment through regenerative ocean farming, and we wanted to sort of enhance the community's well-being by creating, green jobs and as well as sustainable food. And that all kind of falls under the whole Câr-y-Môr and the ocean farm. So community was at its core, absolutely, because coming into a community that you're not originally from is already sort of challenging in itself. And when you come in and you create a 3D ocean farm that nobody's heard of before, that in itself becomes the thing that you need to start explaining and trying to get the benefits across. But 3 years down the line, and we've managed to employ 14 people in the local area, and I hope that we can continue to grow from there. We rely hugely on everybody in the community, but especially on the local fishermen, as I mentioned before, because they come from generations that know the waters around here. And if you do not have people like that that's helping you out, I don't think you'd be able to do something like this, especially not in the area that we're at. It's treacherous waters. You need to know your way around. And they just understand it. They know what to do, where the farms should be located, why they should be there, and they can just think in a different level to somebody that just maybe never had been in touch with the ocean itself, right? We need the community, we need the local fishermen, we need everybody to be supportive of it. And we didn't want to create a business that's just a for profit and you make some money and you move away. We wanted to create something that can rebuild communities. And I think especially when COVID happened, because we got our licenses in October 2020 for the farms, and we had to move down here, when it was between lockdowns, and for the most part, we kind of left our houses where we came from for months. They just stood there, and we all moved in together here to get this up and running. And again, we needed the support of the community. It was very difficult because you couldn't go out in the community and hold meetings and explain who we are and why we're here. So it was kind of all through word of mouth. But once we could kind of, move around a bit more freely and people understood what we were doing and they could come and see us and we could go to them, I really started feeling that, the backing of a community, especially when you're doing something like this, is extremely important. This is what we always used to do. We always used to work together in communities and grow food together and help each other. And I genuinely feel that a community benefit society is a business model that a lot more businesses need to adopt, because it's not just, you can't rely on just one person to make all the decisions. You definitely can't rely on them to always make the right decision. But as a collective together, you think like the hive mind. There's lots of opinions, of course, but everyone can decide together what opinions are the best or what ideas are the best, and therefore you come up with the best way of doing things, I think.
So what does the structure look like of a community benefit society? Is there a person in charge? You can kind of say like, enough, we need to move in this direction, we need to make a decision, or is it sort of all by collaboration, or like how does it actually work in terms of managing the business? And then also considering sort of the local environmental element too, like these people are of the community, they don't want to lose these places. From what I understand, this part of Wales like heavily relies on tourism as well. It's obviously being outside a lot and those being huge attractions for people. So how does the management actually look like and the community influences in running the business?
Interesting, I would say that. And we're still learning every day as we go through it. So I think, community benefit societies for the bigger part, although it is changing and it's changing quite quickly at the moment, but when we started looking into it, for the most part, you found that it was local villagers trying to buy over their local pub, right? They didn't want it taken over by some big business or chain or anything like that. So they kind of buy it over and maybe keep whoever the current managers were in place and just have the pub stay the way it was, but it belongs to the community. As far as Câr-y-Môr is concerned, it works slightly differently, and then I think it's as I said, it's still evolving, we're still learning a lot, but we do have sort of a managing director. My father-in-law, because of his background and knowledge of sort of being in aquaculture already, he's just kind of the right person to already be in there and running the day-to-day of it. We've got 14 other employees who are either working on the farms, or they're working in the shellfish processing side of things, or they're part of the shop. We've got a stakeholder engagement lead, which is extremely important for this area and as abroad as well, to make sure that everybody understands what we are trying to do here and try and build that support from there as well. And yes, back to the sort of the community side of things, I'm trying to keep the jobs going where you are in a rural coastal community, and as you mentioned, are extremely reliant on tourism. We moved here in 2020. We'd seen it go from ghost town to insanely busy the year right after sort of the gates, if you will, opened back up again, to I feel like it's kind of now lulled out a little bit again, now that people feel like they can actually fly again and go further abroad. It's still busy with summer months, of course, but once the season's over, it goes back to the small community that is here. And that means that a lot of the jobs kind of also, end at that same time. So we wanted to really create something that can run year round, full-time, year-round jobs. And, again, we only been 3 years, but the ones that we have employed have got a year-round full-time job now, because we've got enough going on that manages that to happen. And again, I hope that we can continue growing in that aspect. Decision making happens on a weekly basis, daily basis. It could happen amongst 1 or 2 people to the entire team sitting down thinking, right, we need to make a decision and how are we going to move forward from this, to, yes, the MD stepping up and go, look, we just need to move on and we need to get this done now. And then we can figure it out almost as we go, right? We've got a board, and they get together every 6 weeks as well. So they discuss sort of the more intricate things, the finances and so on as well. And then there's a yearly AGM. So you can become a member. It costs £1. You can become a member of Câr-y-Môr, and then you're part of that decision making that happens once a year on the real big decisions of where we're moving to. It's a very different structure to normal business. We try and not really have, a hierarchy of things, but we do have to rely on expertise within certain areas and be empathetic to everybody that, is trying to make this work together. So yeah, it's a new concept for myself as well to learn. But every day I feel, you definitely learn something new, but it's also quite interesting to see how you can work collaboratively in making something happen that we all want to make happen, and we all want to make this survive.
That's incredible. And so moving on a little bit to the product piece, which is sort of the heart of the discussion here. I'm a big fan of Câr-y-Môr's products. As soon as I found out about it, I ordered a bunch of stuff from seaweed fertilizer, the seaweed granola. I was actually surprised. I was like, this is actually really, really good. The seaweed bath sort of bundle is also fantastic. So you have quite a range of products. And then actually a couple of weeks ago, I was recording with Douglas McMaster from Silo. You came up in Câr-y-Môr because you're supplying products with them. And then I saw on Instagram, there's a relatively new restaurant that opened up here in London called Mountain. That's from some guys that have another Michelin star restaurant. So you have quite the range of products that you're producing. Can you talk a little bit about what Câr-y-Môr is making? Like, obviously, to keep 14 people employed, like you're doing enough to keep that moving. So can you talk about the range of products that you have out?
Yeah, certainly. I think I just had this discussion yesterday with somebody, and I'm still kind of blown away by the amount of products that we are creating and kind of working on as well. So I think when we started the idea of Câr-y-Môr, and we knew about shellfish, as a family, we all love shellfish. So that was a given. And then when the seaweed factor came in, we knew a little bit that seaweed, can be used in certain dishes. Of course, it used to be a staple food of the miners in Wales, lava bread. It's called the Welshman's caviar. That a lot of people kind of know about that, but it also died off with that industry. Then when we really started diving into, and you realize there's thousands of species of seaweed out there, there's hundreds of it in the UK, and what the benefits of all of them are, and which ones can you farm, which ones can only sort of be hand harvested, and then you start talking to chefs, and then when you start talking to chefs like chefs from Mountain and Silo and Brat, that's all Thomas Parry is the Mountain, and Brat and Smoking Goat, and they call another restaurant in London, they all really interested in the seaweed side of things. They realize there's different types of flavors that you can get from it. There's different types of benefits, nutrients, vitamins and all of that you needed from it. And so then they start requesting what they might need for their dishes. And then that really kind of helped us kind of figure out what we needed to grow. Where's the demand for that? And that's just on the level of providing to restaurants, right? So that was the food side of things. Then we realized that you can actually start making sort of bioplastics from it. And then who's now one of our investors, is a company called Nopla, also based in London. So they've managed to figure out how to take seaweed and turn that into a film that goes into biodegradable takeaway boxes, right? And then also create a sort of a sachet that you can have your sauces in, or you can have liquids in it, and it's fully biodegradable. It melts away in your mouth, and it's all kind of based off of seaweed. You can also make biocompostable plant pots, which is a product that we are currently working on, and hopefully we'll have more on that sort of next year when we've gone and hopefully built our refinery. But you can also make biostimulants, a fertilizer. And again, that's something that's not brand new. This has existed, centuries ago. The farmers used to go down to the beach, collect all the washed up seaweed and lay it down in their fields. And that would work and act as a fertilizer for their fields. But as sort of overpopulation started happening and people didn't like the smell or the slimy stuff that got washed up on their beaches, it became a thing that was, sort of disregarded. It had to be cleaned up. It had to be thrown away. And I guess, with that, again, we also lost that knowledge of what the benefits of it really is. So yes, they are, I don't know, I've not really come to an end of the number of applications that you can do with seaweed, which is incredible. From being a kid surfing the waves in Cape Town and finding it rather annoying because you keep on caught up in my leash or my surfboard, to now it actually being a business and, sort of something that we concentrate our daily lives on. We can do, like you've mentioned, various types of products. We've done granola. We do just the flakes that you can use either in a broth or replacement of salt or things like that. You can put it in your bath. It's very good for your skin, the oils that the seaweed releases. It's just endless. There's so much that you could do, and you've got to keep yourself sort of a bit more. You need to keep yourself a bit back from trying to get overwhelmed with what you can create and go with it. And of course, then the other side of it is, I guess, is the educational side of things. A lot of people are still brand new to eating and experiencing seaweed, so you can't overwhelm them with that as well. So you've got to kind of slowly introduce that again. And we do that through an educational program that we do with the local schools, but equally, podcasts like this or various other sort of engagements that we have, we get to go and speak to people and try and slowly introduce them to the wonders of seaweed.
And I think it's funny because we were both at the Patagonia event in London that launched the film that Câr-y-Môr is featured in, which I want to talk about a little bit as well. But there's a person in the crowd who kind of made that point about who eats seaweed. I can't remember the exact wording of his question, but it was something to that effect. And is it is part of working with the chefs, like that sort of cultural transmission from chef to everyday eater of like, you can actually use seaweed in a bunch of different ways. I think on the either the website or the packaging for one of the flakes, they recommend putting it in mac and cheese. So like there's everyday uses for these sort of things. And like, how do you start to shift that conversation of like all the different ways people can use seaweed in their everyday diet?
Absolutely. I think where it's easier is when people come to the shop or they come to us and we can talk them through it. We try and explain as much as we can through the website or different types of speaking engagements or events, but it is quite nice when somebody's right there and you can talk them through it. It is, I can understand that it's quite difficult. Suddenly you realize, wait, there's more than one type of seaweed that's out there, and what you mean you can use it in different types of things and different types of food. Yes, absolutely, that you can use to replace salts with, because it contains that. The UK nation as a whole is quite deficient in iodine. Well, seaweed is absolutely packed with that. I'm not saying go out there and go and just eat a bunch of seaweed. We all need to take it easy, but you can slowly start introducing it into your diet. You can use it to replace like bay leaves, for instance. You can if you're a vegan, there's something called the bacon of the sea, which is a dulse, and it's got this lovely umami flavor. And if you fry it properly, then it could taste quite close to what bacon is. And with chefs that obviously got that palate and that imagination, and maybe they've read up a lot more and learned about past things that used to be done with seaweed, they can create these wonderful dishes. And I think that's key, to be able to reintroduce it into people's diets, but also sort of into their vocabulary and their knowledge, that when they go to these restaurants and and they see, oh, there's a crab linguine, but it's made from sea spaghetti rather than actual pasta that's in there. And then they go, what is sea spaghetti? And you go, but it is an actual seaweed that looks like spaghetti. I think things like that, making it a bit more fun and engaging, will get people to slowly start adopting it. It's a very fast growing industry. I know that there's companies in America and as well as in the Netherlands that's creating a kelp burger. It's something that we are experimenting with as well. We're working on sort of a kimchi that's made from seaweed. I mean, you mentioned the granola that we make, which I love. So yeah, things like that you already know, and you just kind of replace a few things with seaweed. I think will make it a lot easier to transition to start sort of taking that into your diets.
And so maybe we'll connect the dots a little bit here with people discovering all these amazing new ways they can use seaweed. Also, sort of part of the heart of the Patagonia film and the campaign that Câr-y-Môr was part of, which was to work to end bottom trawling in the oceans. And the name of the film about Câr-y-Môr was the English translation of the name of the business. So For the Love of the Sea, which I encourage everyone to go and check out. And in the video, I can't remember who said it, but they're talking about how when we can't see underneath the surface layer of the ocean, we don't realize there's a problem. But yet what this video really highlights, in addition to the beauty of Câr-y-Môr and the business that you're building, is sort of the dangers of bottom trawling and why we do actually need something like regenerative ocean farming. So why was it important for you and for Câr-y-Môr to get involved in this campaign and help support ending bottom trawling in our oceans?
Patagonia, we've now been working together for, well, pretty much since the start of things. I've as long as I can remember, have been a supporter and a big fan of Patagonia and their values. And I think when we started working on the idea of Câr-y-Môr, I knew that somehow I wanted to work with Câr-y-Môr in some capacity, because I knew our values overlapped, that it's a passion, not just a passion, but a drive for us to protect our oceans. For me, especially being a dad of two young kids, it's a constant thing in my mind to think, what am I going to leave behind for them? Fast forward a few years, and Patagonia approached us and said, look, we're going to have this huge campaign, and it's just going to be centered around our oceans. And our call to action is to ban bottom trawling. And we would love for you to be part of this campaign. And at first I felt like, well, but we are not directly affected by bottom trawling. We are very fortunate here, especially in our area that we've got a marine protected area, and there isn't anything like that happening here. We have got beautiful oceans in Pembrokeshire. But ultimately, it affects our ocean as a whole. I remember growing up in Cape Town, being a child, that my dad used to take me down to the harbour and lift me over the side of the boat, and I could see just thousands of fish all over the bottom of the boat, and I could pick out which ones I wanted to take home and have for dinner. And that's all gone. All those fishing boats are gone. There's one or two left, a handful left in these harbours, if any at all in some. And so that really affects me in seeing what we've done to our oceans and how we've treated it. And yes, the person that was mentioning that we don't know what's happening is my father-in-law. He put it in such a good way, and it's that if you're not involved like we are on a daily basis with the ocean, then it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. If you just look to the seas and you think, well, it's so vast, it's so big, surely we can't really destroy it. Surely there's nothing that we can do to something so big. But unless you are really close to it, you do not see the rising sea temperatures. You do not see that we're treating it like an actual, like a dump. We're treating it with such disrespect. And you can see it on the beaches, the plastic pollution that's washing up, the fishing nets that's washing up. You can see marine mammals that's washing up, being caught in these nets or in plastic and things. All of that encapsulates why we wanted to be part of this campaign. The one side, and there's a few films that's part of this campaign, and a lot of them highlights really well how bottom trawling has affected them directly. I think the Câr-y-Môr side, the story that we're trying to tell is that there is something positive. There is light. And if you can approach it with a new thinking cap on, and if you can approach it with an innovative way, like regenerative ocean farming, we can try and rebuild these habitats, and we can try and rebuild these fisheries and bring local fishermen back into what they love and what they know. But we do also need entities like Patagonia that has got a huge platform and a huge backing to be able to make decision makers realize what harm is being done to our oceans, and that they can be held accountable for it. And hopefully we can achieve a better ocean again, and reestablishing what once was something just, that fed the entire world and can do. But we need to treat it with more respect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Francois. I can't wait to get this episode out. I think people are really going to be excited about sort of the opportunities that you're sharing here. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm humbled by this, and I really appreciate that people like yourself do things like this to spread the message.